What is something your teacher did in school that you're still salty about? I had a teacher accuse me and a classmate of cheating on an exam because we had the same answer. It was a multiple choice test, and she was upset we both had it correct. At the end of my first week at a new school, the teacher handed out slips of paper with our current grade. I had a solid A at my old school, but the teacher said I had an F. I asked her why. She said I didn't hand in the quarter project. I reminded her I had just moved to the school. She said she would give me the weekend to do it. The project was to interview a longtime local resident and write a paper about their experiences. The articles were being collected for a book she was writing. I failed the class. My English teacher admitted to marking down all my work by a grade because I think you could do better. I was doing better, and you made it look like I wasn't. Caused me to stop even trying. I had left my calculator on my desk in physics class, and the teacher took it. I had engraved my initials on it, so it was unmistakable. My problem with this was that he always asked me during class if I had my calculator, and I told him I still couldn't find it. The end of school year comes around and another student was snooping through his desk and found my calculator. All year that asshole was giving me a 0 for the day since I didn't have it. 20 years ago, we had to make a diorama. We all had them sitting on tables in the classroom, and one day some other kid was messing around, fell into the table, and smashed mine. I failed the assignment for having a smashed diorama. Never gave my art a higher grade than AB+. Even though she asked me every year if she could hold my art back, to show everyone how to correctly apply a technique, or what she wanted from everyone else that next year. Not good enough for an A, but this is perfect and it's what I want everyone to do. Which is it then? Threatened to hit me when, as a brand new midterm transfer in grade 3, I was too scared to speak to ask for her help, so I had tapped her on the arm instead to get her attention. Apparently, that warranted threatening to assault an 8-year-old in the 90s. I had been there less than 2 weeks and had just transferred from a school of 40 to a school of over 200. Alright, so this is something that really had me pissed off as a kid, and every time I think about it I get fired up. I was in 3rd grade. The 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grades were doing a week of square dance, then at the end of the week on Friday, we were going to have a recital and do a performance. Sadly, I was leaving for vacation and that would be starting that Friday, so I couldn't be in the recital. Oh well, I could still enjoy the square dance and have some fun with the rest of the classes, right? No. My teacher made me sit in the classroom alone, while everyone was across the hall in the big classroom doing the dances. She made me do freaking vocabulary words for hours while I had to sit, in a darkened room, alone, listening to the muffled sounds of Cotton Eye Joe, stomping, and laughing coming from the hallway. I was so pissed. I was crying every day. I begged her to just let me sit in there. I offered to clap, help with music, hold up a sign, just sit in the corner, anything, to be a part of it. But no, I had to sit alone, no lights, and do vocabulary words with tears just running down onto the paper. For 4 days straight. She basically punished me with in-school suspension for not being able to be at the recital due to my family vacation. I freaking hate that to this day. In middle school, I did a display with real fossils that my parents had let me borrow. The teacher was insistent that I sell the fossils to him, but I refused. So the teacher gave me an F on the display. In grade 4, my teacher kept making me redo my printing sheets because my handwriting wasn't neat. Eventually, I asked him why he didn't make any of the boys redo their sheets, because they had messy handwriting too. I still remember the look of shock on his face, but didn't understand the significance at the time because I was just genuinely asking. I don't remember what he said afterwards, other than the fact that I didn't find his answer satisfying. She gave me detention for chewing gum. I didn't even enter the classroom when she did this. She smelled mint from my mouth when I said good morning back to her. One of my teachers simply hated my smirk, and we got into it in the hallway. He looked me dead in the eye and said I couldn't do shit cause he was a teacher and then slapped me. Well, joke's on him cause a decade later his wife a high school student. You, Mr. Marchese. Your wife kids. A commonly relatable Reddit scenario. Typed out an essay in class while we were in the computer lab, yet upon printing and handing it in I was accused of plagiarizing it. Don't even remember the teacher's name as she was one of the other staff teachers substituting for the regular one. Just the shrill accusatory tone of her going, "You didn't write this? You miss whoever you were." I worked diligently on that bullshit. Oh my god, my cookery teacher. Won't give her real name, so we shall call her Gordon Ramsay's grandma, aka GR. GRG was an old witch who should have retired years ago and had anger issues. She was furious when she learned I didn't use a gas cooker at home. Electric was cheaper, so didn't know how to immediately fire one up on the first lesson. I was about 10 years old. This woman would bellow at me from across the room. As a sensitive, people-pleasing kid, I was a blubbering, trembling mess each lesson because I was petrified of making mistakes and her shouting at me. One day I was running behind. I always ran behind. And she took my food out of the oven, cakes on a baking tray, and I reached to grab something and accidentally brushed against her arm. This literally screamed, grabbed my wrist and pressed my palm against the baking tray. The baking tray that had just come out of a 200-degree oven. Only for a split second. Didn't hold it there or anything, but it was enough to blister my skin. One day I couldn't face going to her class, so I feigned illness and was kept off school. One of my classmates told me apparently during registration/roll call, when they told her I was off sick. GRG laughed and said, "No, she isn't. She's just scared of me. Nice to see you were so self-aware." I never reported it directly, but I did tell my mom, who demanded the school did something about it. We had a meeting with the head of year who laughed it off, saying, "She's a good teacher. She just doesn't like the quiet ones." Nothing was done. If the crusty cow is still alive, she'll be in the Guinness World Records. Rot in hell, GRG. You saw a shy kid, and instead of building up her confidence and patiently teaching her a valuable life skill, you decided to bully her and drag her self-esteem down to rock bottom's basement. It took me ages to learn how to cook because of you. Thankfully, I got my confidence back and now enjoy cooking. One of my high school art classes was called 3D design, which was basically clay, sculpting, and various three-dimensional artwork. On the first day of class, my teacher pulled me aside and told me she looked at my schedule, which was mostly honors and advanced level classes. She said that because I was clearly such a good student, she would grade me on a much harsher scale and would hear none of my objections that being book smart doesn't translate to artistic abilities. The poor marks I received in that class skewed my GPA. I was about 9 years old and she wrote our language's word for ceremony on the blackboard. She spelled it with an S, like ceremony, and I raised my hand and asked if the word should not in fact be spelled with a C. She argued that she was quite sure it actually was an S, and wouldn't back down, even though I was absolutely sure. I read a lot of books as a kid and had read the word in my native language multiple times. Of course, I looked it up after the class, and it turned out I was right. Still haven't forgotten, 20 years later. I guess she didn't want to lose face in front of a bunch of kids. Same happened to me in 3rd grade. A substitute teacher was teaching us about the 13 colonies, and I pointed out that she omitted Georgia. She said no, Georgia was not one of the original colonies, and proceeded to list all the other colonies plus Vermont and Maine. I said that she had listed 14 colonies, and that Vermont and Maine were not among them. She sent me to the principal's office for talking back. The principal brought me back upstairs and chewed her out in front of the class, for what it's worth. She told me to get the hell out of her classroom because I forgot to get something signed by my mom. She then marked me as truant and played dumb when the principal got involved. Similar story. My mother had me relay a question to my kindergarten teacher about an upcoming field trip. When I asked my teacher, she started screaming at me. I don't recall all she said other than continuing to call me stupid and threatening to have me paddled by the principal. I just remember going back and wanting to hide under my desk with everyone staring at me. This was just one example of her behavior. That impacted me for years. I'm half deaf. I was in social studies class. My teacher asked me a question. Didn't hear her. I said, "What?" She yelled at the top of her lungs, "Will you listen?" After that day, I told her, once she dies, I plan on pissing on her grave. I still plan on doing that. Math decided to take me to one task. I had to solve it in front of my whole class. I did. I was pretty confident the answer was correct. Then she checked it, went full crazy mode and made fun of me for about 5 minutes, called me silly words and rewarded with juicy bad grade. Then she proceeded to show my class how it should be done. She did it exactly the same, just like I did 5 minutes earlier. Some of my classmates told her about it. She was like, "Oh, y'all distracted me." She never spoke to me directly after that. I was on course for getting an A* in IT for my GCSE, meaning I'd be able to do a web design module for A-levels. A month before the submission, our tutor managed to lose every single piece of coursework for the entire class. Ended up with AU, and had to spend the first semester of college doing a level 2 IT course instead of web design. 21 years later, and I'm still pissed about it. Not the teacher, the school. When I was 8, I built a legit, fully functional robot for the science fair. In the early 80s. Not to brag, but it was nice. I took parts from 2 remote-controlled cars, PVC pipe for the arms, an upside-down small trash bin for the body, etc. I lost to some kid that built the non-working, generic Apollo model rocket that every kid builds. His dad was probably the judge. Louisiana is stupid. I was little, probably kindergarten age. We were near the end of the school year, and we're having a raffle for gifts to take into summer. The top gift was a hella cool bike, and I, being from a very poor family, could only dream of such a thing. Anyway, a little girl is brought up and is given a bucket filled with slips of paper, upon which were written the names of each student. She stirred her little hands around briefly, plucked a piece of paper, and raised it to the light. I clearly saw my name written in reverse through the light shining overhead, so I knew my name had been the first drawn and thus the top prize, the bike, was mine. Well, the teacher overseeing the draw didn't like me very much because my family was poor. So a second after the paper was raised up, she slapped the paper gently out of the drawer's hand, stirred her own hand around in the bucket, clearly reading the names as she did, and plucked another name. Lo and behold, the new name belonged to the popular classmate with the rich parents. I wish I was fucking kidding. The teacher even maintained eye contact with me as she smiled thinly, and the winner scurried up to get her bike. That's when I knew life wasn't fair. F you, Ms. Simmons. In the 4th grade on Fridays, we were given these little things called weekly readers. It was this 4-page kids' newspaper about animals, volcanoes, and other kid stuff. On the last page is 4 questions to see if you read it. No big deal, and I finished mine in minutes. So I just sat there waiting for others to finish, and the teacher called me up to the desk. So I went up there, and she told me to go to the office because she saw me cheating. Cheating? On a weekly reader? So I went to the office and got the paddle for cheating on a test. You know, those wooden weapons that knock the wind out of you, and you couldn't sit for a week. I then get home to find my mom and dad pissed because they got a call about me cheating on a test, and my dad gave me the belt. It was my first taste of violence, and no one listened to me. I was beaten, and that day, I lost my trust in society and family and lost my innocence. I hope that fat teacher died in a fire. Math teacher asked the class a question. I confidently put my hand up and gave what I thought was the correct answer. Teacher looks at me and says, "Not everything has to be a joke, Mark." That truly crushed my spirit, and I never put my hand up to answer another question all year. Marking me down as present when I was at home sick. When I came back to school, I got suspended for skipping every other class. When I argued that I was falsely accused, my suspension got extended. My school had a policy that if you had 9 unexcused absences, you would not earn any credits for that year. I was an A student and got 0 credits that year. I dropped out of school and got my GED. That guy really my shit up. The cutoff point for getting an A was 80%, so my history teacher gave me 79.9%. He refused to back down, even when my mother put in a complaint to the school, asking what I had done wrong to miss out on 0.1%. He refused to give a reason. Still kind of burns me up when I think of it, because it was so petty. Signed, AB++ history student. Had a teacher who repeatedly dress-coded me for things that weren't even in the rulebook. Had the audacity to call it water under the bridge when I confronted her years later as an adult. No, it's not water under the bridge. You don't get to mistreat someone and call it water under the bridge. That phrase is reserved solely for victims who have decided to forgive their abusers, and I don't forgive grown adults who bully children. She actively disrupted my education by sending me out of the classroom multiple times just because she doesn't like goth kids or the clothes they wear. The only skin exposed was my face and hands. This was during my trips and a hoodie even in summer phase. In about 91, I was starting to get into animals, specifically marine animals. I wanted to be a marine biologist, so I thought. Junior year in high school, we all knew we had to do a bug collection. So I went on a family trip out of state and collected bugs in preparation. I put a lot of time into it. Mr. Cope, the worst biology teacher ever, failed me because I could not have collected bugs he'd never seen. Completely shattered my confidence and desire to peruse science of any sort. Mr. Cope. The made a point of belittling me every single day for a year because my interests were different from the mainstream in a small town. Nothing wacky either. I was into pop culture, like Ninja Turtles and Simpsons, etc., in a place where there was no culture outside football for boys or netball, or just being quiet for girls. I'm over 40 now, and I still go back to that town a few times a year. And that old prick is lucky I haven't got my revenge now that the tables of relative strength have turned. Also, he used to wave his mushroom around in the change rooms when we had swimming carnivals. Like every time.